My first drug of choice was validation. Is that like connection, commitment? You know, I was committed to, which is so strange because I did so much lone wolf kind of stuff, but really approval. Like if you made me created a space where I felt like I had purpose and value, I was committed to that.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Kate Bryan, and I'm happy to be back here for another week with another inspiring episode of our Incarceration and Women series. As you know by now, women are the fastest growing population in jail and prison, and we believe that every woman has a story to tell, every woman's life and story has purpose, and that every woman has the power to change the world through her life. This is another episode that embodies all of those things. But before we get into this week's episode, please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. Subscribe to us on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, and check out our website, onegirlrevolution.com, for more podcast episodes, videos, and so much more. Also, don't forget to check out our Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on YouTube, and you can also find the link on our website. This week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast features Carolyn Presnell of WELD Seattle. She also serves as program director of 1426. This woman was incarcerated some 30 different times throughout her life, but finally got out one last time and turned her own experience into the drive to help others who are getting out of jail and prison. Carolyn started with an opportunity at WELD Seattle as program manager for WELD's transitional women's housing program, and now is the program director of a new WELD Seattle project called 1426. WELD Seattle works to equip system-impacted individuals with housing, employment, and resources conducive to recovery and successful reintegration back into society after incarceration. 1426 is a new reentry resource center that will provide connection to housing, employment, mental health, and recovery resources for system-impacted individuals. 1426's services will also include health and wellness programming, connection to legal resources, and mentorship, in addition to the center's plans to offer adult education classes, family reunification assistance, connection to public services, and trauma-informed yoga, art, and music therapy. Carolyn joins the One Girl Revolution podcast this week to share her own life story, her journey through incarceration. She talks about her journey to sobriety, her life after incarceration, and she talks about the incredible work she's doing now with WELD Seattle and 1426. WELD Seattle is transforming the world, and Carolyn is at the helm, empowering others through opportunities, resources, support, and above all, love. I'm so excited to share this amazing woman's story and her great work with you. So without further ado, here's Carolyn. Carolyn, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Hello.
I'm so excited to have you on. I feel like we've only talked a couple of times, but I feel like we're old friends. And so I can't wait to share this conversation with all of our listeners and share your story and all your great work. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear from you. Who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
I feel really fortunate. It depends on what stage of my life you were looking at. But I think that there's three that stand out. And one was a woman who cared for me when I was a girl, and I was transitioning through a whole bunch of stuff like state care and my own femininity and puberty and those kinds of things. And she was the first woman. Her name was Connie Kaufman, and she was my Tai Chi teacher. And she did these things. There was my behavior made me, my community not trust me. Like the choices that I was making in my own personal life made people question my motives all the time. And she chose to trust me and she made me trustworthy in my engagement with her. Because she opted to see like what was delightful about me as opposed to looking at like these, symptoms of like what I was experiencing like in my personal life. And so like, that's the person that stands out the most. And then as an initial influence, I think the second person was my friend Janelle, and she was fierce and courageous and bold And she had this way of telling her story that had I told mine in the way that she did, like what would be evoked was shame. And she said things with pride and courage and boldness. And I remember thinking, I don't know how you do that, but I want to learn that. And that, interestingly enough, she was someone that I had known, kind of in the wildness of my life and in my sobriety. And we had all these different iterations. And unfortunately, she died 4 or 5 years ago as a result of chronic alcoholism. She never could find her way out of that, but she changed my life and who I am as a woman with the way that she lived her life and her truth. And then, I think out of all of the people who I've lost in the world, she is one of the people that I miss the most. Every other person, I realize like the transitory nature of life in general, and I understand that everything happens in cycles and seasons, and so like they flow in and they flow out. But that's one of those ones that I just never quite not miss. I've never quite let go of. And then the last one is my current influence, which is Amy King, who is the founder of WELD Seattle and WELD Works and Pallet Shelters. Her drive and love for my community of people, folks who are reentering the world from, or maybe even entering the world for the first time from, chronic trauma, drug addiction, and incarceration. Like she holds doors open and elevates platforms and gives and loves with her whole heart and speaks the truth, and has been a dynamic influence in my current life. So I had 3.
Well, it's a power 3. It's a power trifecta.
The power 3, I know.
Of women that still inspire you, and their legacy lives on, your friend's legacy lives on through you. And yeah, you're just such a beacon of hope to me. And I'm so excited to share your story with our audience and more about your great work in WELD Seattle. But before we get into that, I would love, Carolyn, to rewind to your early life and share a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and just a little bit about your life.
Yeah, well, I'm born and raised in Seattle, Washington. I did tours of duty through what is Seattle's version of the projects, and oldest child in my little core family. I was my mother's first child. I'm the first acknowledged child of color born into my family. So my people were deeply religious people on both my mother's side and my father's side. And there was deep racism that existed on my father's side, and again on my mother's, and really just ignorance, I think, more than anything else. But my father's was racism with valid reason. Deep South people, my family were brought in on Haitian slave ships on my father's side of the family. And so worked on plantations, all of that stuff. My grandmother worked on plantations much of her life. And so there was this, I was born into this kind of disruption, and it was the 70s, was whatever it was. And, this child of color born out of wedlock. And so there was a lot of opinions about that. And I took my child's mind and I translated the information in a way that made sense and was meaningful to me. And the translation is that there's no place for me here, that there wasn't a place for me here. And that I was actually going to have to figure it out. And I don't know that was anyone's intention. That was just really my interpretation. My mother is probably one of my heroes today, but that wasn't always my truth. And some of my favorite things about myself are gifts from my mother. It's such a strange thing too, is like your mother, like I've never had a real deep affinity or affiliation with like my ancestors, my ancestry. That wasn't as a matter of fact, I spent a lot of my life denying my story, not trying to claim it. And so, but I tell you, in the passing of my mother and my grandmother, I really have have this deep knowing of the women of my lineage, and I see them in me, in the way that I move in the world, and I'm so grateful for that stuff. But growing up in the time that I grew up, there was, and also my mother struggled with mental health stuff, severely bipolar, manic depressive, deep depressions, huge manic episodes, and her coping mechanism for that was drugs and alcohol. And so that played out in our household. And so I found myself responsible for more than maybe was fair. It was cleaning up messes, and I live in that time is that it looks really good on the outside, so people don't come stick a stick in your cage and get to looking around on the inside. And you didn't air your dirty laundry, even though sometimes it would, fall out the front door and into the street. We had that system. And so what it taught me was to be a secret keeper. And that got real muddied with the ability to tell the truth. And so it was secrets and lies. And that was what you did for safety and security. It was what you did to make other people feel safe. All of those things. And so we spent a lot of time trying to clean up the mess, clean up the mess and make sure that nobody came and disrupted the household. There was lots of violence, domestic violence in my family system. My mother and my stepfather, and I don't know what the catalyst were, but I assume it was connected to that. We ended up in state care. We would end up in foster care as a result of what was going on at home, the instability, and being torn between things being quiet and feeling safe and then being with strangers. It was, that combination. And it's it's a strange thing when you don't know, as an adult, I understand it now, but as a kid, making these choices, do I sleep on the top of the bed or do I sleep under the bed? And if I choose this wrong, there's a cost. And then choosing wrong, not knowing that it was an unreasonable choice. There was never a right choice for that stuff, but that contributed to my own belief that I couldn't trust myself to choose how to take care of myself in the world. And so drugs and alcohol entered the scene. And that was, it wasn't that it made my problems go away. It made it so that I didn't care that they existed. And that was a solution. It was a coping strategy. I had an experience when I was probably about 13 and I was in state care and I was dealing with just, I don't even remember what the moment was. And it was something I never told another person about it. Probably 20 years went by before I had said it. And when I said it, I realized it was the first time that I'd said it out loud. But I had a suicide attempt and I had tried to jump out of a 2-story window into this asphalt driveway. And I landed in the driveway and knocked the wind out of me. And I laid there for what seemed like forever. And I got up and I went into the house, and my grief was that I didn't die. Because I don't think I had enough understanding about life or death. I just really couldn't take how I felt in my interior. And my life was a series of that, is creating these disruptions outside of my body that were bigger than the way that I felt on the inside of my body. And bang a gong. And it makes it tolerable. But I remember feeling like it was my first understanding or acknowledgement of the depth of my own loneliness, because there was no one that knew. There was no one that was gonna know. No one was coming to fix it. There was no way to fix it. And it really thrust me into this idea that the world will not protect you. And in my strivings to make myself strong, instead what happened is I made myself hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine just being raised, and I don't think that you're alone in your story. I think what you experienced, unfortunately, so many other people, and you look at even women who are incarcerated, we know that women are the fastest growing population within jail and prison. And the majority of the time there's some sort of trauma. There are other issues. It's fascinating to me when you start hearing different women's stories and what happened in their lives. And it's not just the incarcerated population. I think that women are so fascinating, and we have so many facets to our lives and why we feel what we feel, why we believe what we believe. But for you growing up in all those different situations, I imagine that it was easy to just lose sight of who you were as a person, because you're spending so much of your early life, learning how to lie to yourself, to the people around you, and then to feel numb, and then not knowing how to not even being in a safe place, right? Like you said, you couldn't make, there wasn't a single decision that you could make that felt safe, whether you sleep on the top of the bed or under the bed or all the things. And so I just imagine that that was it was hard to know who you were.
Yeah. Well, and it's all of the things. And like, those are, just the trauma pieces or whatever that, that formative stuff. In the same way as that my mother was probably one of the most loving and nurturing people, and was kind to community and created safe places and sanctuaries for other people who needed it. And always had this sense of delight and joy and adventure. And so those were gifts too. And so, and the information was really confusing. It was like not knowing that those two things could exist simultaneously. It's always trying to predict, where we're landing today, or how to evoke the things that made me feel connected and nurtured and all of that stuff. Institutions entered my life when I was pretty young. It started out as truancy and being a runaway, because back then they'd lock you up for that. Pretty consistently. You had to show up to school, you had to show up to wherever. But I made a decision when I was about 13 that I was pretty much done with that. I was in and out of state care for a couple of years, but and I would dip a toe in back at home, and that didn't pan out so well. By then I was grown, and I had a grown woman's mind about how I was gonna, be in the world and what was tolerable and what wasn't, as much as I could make the decision. And so, yeah. And God forbid, one of the things is they go, "Oh, you're so intelligent and attractive and articulate, if you would just apply yourself." And it was yeah, if I've already got all that going on, I'm not actually sure why I'm here. And so just taking that into the world, and it didn't do me any favors for someone to tell me that was smart, because it made me feel like I knew. And I didn't have a clue what was coming my way.
If you would like to hear more stories straight from women who have been incarcerated, check out One Girl Revolution's The Girl Inside on YouTube. One Girl Revolution took a film crew behind the walls of the largest single-site jail, Cook County Jail, and interviewed 5 incarcerated women. This short documentary highlights a life-changing academic class and the life and experiences of these 5 women, and what is revealed is the girl inside. You can watch The Girl Inside today on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. And now back to this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast. So you had your own experience with incarceration. What can you tell me about that? I know you had your teenage years where you were kind of dipping your toe into it, but what can you share about your own experience with incarceration?
Well, it really was directly connected to drugs and alcohol, the stuff that I would do for drugs and alcohol. But also I think probably my first drug of choice was validation. Is that connection, commitment? I was committed to, which is so strange because I did so much lone wolf kind of stuff, but really approval. If you made me created a space where I felt like I had purpose and value, I was committed to that. And so, I ran with people that were older, and they were doing, they were embroiled in drug addiction and alcoholism. So criminal lifestyle came with that stuff and it was stuff that I'd seen around home. So it made, that stuff felt safe for me. Drugs and alcohol were a rite of passage in my house, and it didn't change when I went to the street. And so I started running around with people who were doing big stuff. And I wanted to be accepted by them. And, they seemed to be really fearless. I never felt that way. I was always terrified, but I didn't want them to go. I wanted to be able to stay there. And so I made big choices based on what the men in my life were doing, or, how the women who I seemed to respect and admire carried themselves. And I just parroted that stuff, and it led me into incarceration pretty quick. Right after my 18th birthday, I started getting locked up in the county jail, and it didn't change. I was an 18-year-old kid, and it didn't change. The last time I walked into a county jail, I was 45 years old. And I went from being the youngest in the tank to being the oldest in the tank. And when I was in there, I was like, this legit has to stop. Like, I can't do this, not one more time. And of course I had children of my own by then. And I was like, this is not at all what I envisioned. Well, I mean, for starters, I didn't think I was going to live past 25. So, I mean, I'd already beat the mark, and I was dragging around along the bottom for a long time. But yeah, so I started getting booked into jail, and, shit, had been more than 30 times I was booked into county jail in the course of my lifetime in Washington state alone. I did a couple of, stints when I was in California, because I took off down there thinking that like a change of scene was going to change my life, and didn't. I was like, I need to go home where I know people, because I can't be going to jail in a place where I don't, and came back. But yeah, that was really what the deal looked like. And I got sober when I was 25, and I'd had a couple of kids in active addiction in the lifestyle, and I would try to pull it together to parent them, but I didn't have any of the skills. None. I had no idea what it was. I had denied my own femininity. Like, that wasn't a safe thing for me to, I used it for barter. I didn't use it for nurture. I didn't know what it meant to be a girl or a woman in my own body, and without it being transactional. And so that's a big part of my story too, years in the sex industry and those kinds of things. And so like, but I had a couple of kids, and it was like, oh my God, I don't know how to parent these kids. I didn't know what it felt like to be parented. I had none of the skills. And so I'd try to fake it, and it would fill me with despair. And so it seemed like they were better with someone else, like that maybe this wasn't, I wasn't doing them any favors. And, the woman I didn't want to be like, it turned out that, I woke up and not only was I like her, like I couldn't pull off the things that she was pulling off to care for us. And I despaired about that. And so I got sober when I was 25, and I didn't know that I was going to stay sober. Like, that wasn't the goal, is that get the kids out of state care, and, get some of your legal affairs in order, and, learn how to drink like a lady. And then you're going to go about business as usual. And that didn't happen for me. I ended up having an experience where my son died in state care, and it was at the time just kind of a catalyst for a lot of change in the way that CPS in our state operated. And he was just one of many, and they'd been coming in the news, so it kind of catapulted me into this other space. And surprisingly enough, when that happened, I didn't run to drugs or alcohol. It was like, oh, I got this little girl that's still there, and I got to go get her, and I can't get her if I go get loaded. And so like, I have to figure this out. And so, yeah, it changed my life. And so I stayed because she deserved more. And so I was sober for a number of years, got to be a part of so many transformative experiences. But, the big one, I think that I share most often is like, I learned how to feel all of my feelings from the beginning of the feeling to the end of the feeling. I'd never done that in my life. Like joy, anything that was, one of the higher elevating experiences in the emotional field, I sought to enhance, and anything that I perceived as negative, I sought to annihilate. And so I never felt a feeling from the beginning of the feeling to the end of the feeling. And sobriety and active recovery really allowed a space for me to do that, where I could be just as messy as I was, and people really walked it out with me in real time. And I remember sitting across from these people the day of my son's funeral, and they were people who had just like showed up at this funeral home, and I was rude. People would ask me a question, and I was like, it doesn't seem like any of you have any original thoughts. You're like cattle. And I'd say things like that, and they would just laugh. They thought it was so entertaining. And, but like, I walked outside of the funeral home, and these people that I had been, doing 12-step stuff to go get my slip signed, because I didn't know you could forge it. If I'd have known you could forge it, I probably would have never gone. And they were like, yeah, we just didn't think you were clever enough to feed yourself, so we're here to take you to get food. And I didn't need anybody to gush at me or, tell me soft things. They just saw me, and I remember sitting across the table and watching these people, and I thought, I don't know how you become a person that cares about other people for no reason, but like, I need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. It's like what you're sharing about life. We always think like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Like when somebody's going through something difficult, and I can't even fathom, Carolyn, losing your son in that way. And I'm so sorry that that happened. But I think it's important to think about like sometimes just people being there for you. And even when you're feeling these feelings, you're, whatever, making commentary, and just that people sat with you, the power that that has. We don't have to do the big things. Sometimes it's just being present in someone's life when they're going through something that can make such a world of difference.
Yeah, it changed me. It changed me. And I became committed to the idea in a really different way than I'd ever thought about it, because I was doing all of these things to like salvage what I thought was broken. And all of a sudden I became awake to the idea that I might actually have something to give. Like it could be possible to have something to give.
Yeah. Carolyn, I think you know this, but I did some work with Cook County Jail, and it ended up turning into this short documentary, The Girl Inside. And one of the things that a couple of the women had shared with me that has just stuck with me over the past couple of years and really that experience changed my life in so many different ways. But numerous of the women said, no one ever told me that I mattered. No one ever told me that I had a purpose. No one ever told me that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And just kind of in the same vein, even like you sharing your own story, the power of our purpose. And I think the power that women have to change not only the trajectory of their lives, but the trajectory of their own kids' lives and their families' life in generations and generations to come. And your story is such a beautiful example of that, like that you were able to step up to the plate and say, I need to be the person that I was created to be. I need to be there for my daughter. I need to get my life back on track. And now with the work that you're doing, it's incredible how many lives you're able to empower and then also change.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and in that story, it's like, one of the things that's really been transformational and that allows me to do the work the way that I'm able to do it today is that, I didn't know that at that time that I was going to get sober and I was going to have long-term sobriety. And I didn't understand really why anybody would make the choice to leave. I mean, initially in their, series of life circumstances, and that's whatever, because life shows up and does what it does. But like this inability or unwillingness, whatever it was, I just didn't know that like the thing that was going to make me most effective in the world was to heal and nurture myself. Like, I didn't understand that was going to be the dynamic that like really shifted the way that I was useful to other people. Is that like, it seems so counterintuitive, is that like when to take care of others, like my first job is to take care of my spirit and my heart and my physical body. And that like in caring for me, it would create this space so that I really knew how to meet you where you were and be of service to you, whether you're my child or my employer or whoever, someone in traffic or the grocery store, like all of these places where like I come up against myself. And then, I got loaded and I struggled for 15 years after that to come back, and that's where prison came into play and coming in and out. And it was just like that thing where what it looks like to live in the light and the beauty of your life, but you can't get there. And it's like, and frothy emotional appeal doesn't get it done. It's that like, you're going to lose your kids. Yeah, I know. You're going to lose your life. Yeah, I know. It's like, and yet I can't muster enough of whatever it takes to just sit still. And, for me, I'm one of those ones, I literally have to beat myself up against the wall of my own ideas until someone comes and saves me from myself. And usually it comes in the form, of the King County Correctional Facility. It's like, they're like, okay, little flower, you're done doing what you're doing. And, I, as much as, one doesn't want to be like, no one wants to be imprisoned or treated the way that you're treated, as a number and not a human or any of that stuff. But like, it would be a relief. It was a relief. Like the last time it was like, keep me alive long enough to get me to a prison and I'm done. I need some intercession And because of, however my criminal history looks, I look too scary to stop or something, which it's ridiculous because that's not what's going on in the inside. Like I'm not too scary to stop. It just looks like that. It's that thing. It's like the noise is big on the outside because I can't stand what's going on the inside. And it's like it takes big stuff to stop me from feeling the way that I feel because I feel big. And so, yeah, that last time it was like, that was it.
Yeah. Sometimes life feels like a conveyor belt, right? Like you're just on it. And I know that's a lot of like, especially women who are incarcerated. And like when they get out, it's like sometimes the easiest thing because they get out and they don't have the resources. They don't have a job. They're trying to get their kids back. Their kids are in the system. And it's like all these different things are stacked against you. And sometimes the easiest thing is just to end up right back in the system, just to get a break, get a breath of fresh air, which it's really not a breath of fresh air, but that's how it feels. And so it's hard to kind of get off that conveyor belt. So for you, you talk about that last time. What was the suddenly moment? What was the spark that just was like, this is it, that's it, I'm done? Kind of what led you to where you are now and what you're doing?
So interestingly enough, the second day that I was there, the second time that I went into the institution. The first time was really scary. Like I'm in our units, they do all the stuff that they do to process you into the prison. And first night in the prison, I'm looking out the window and there's the barbed wire fence and the guard shack. And I was like, oh, you've really gone and done it. You have officially gone and done it. And you're here for the duration. There's no one's getting you out of this. And there is this sign that when you walk into the receiving units of the women's prison and WCCW, and it says reentry starts here. And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And and I kept waiting for someone to come give me an answer, and I didn't get one. That was my experience. It's like, you're not here long enough to engage in these activities because there's a waiting list for it, or you're not here long enough to do this programming because it's for people who have this amount of time. And because I was, sentenced to just a couple of years, it made me ineligible for stuff. And, the level of my security clearance, they put me out at the work camp. And back then, if you were an able-bodied person, you went to the work camp and, you chainsawed trees down all day for DNR. And then you fought wildfires all night, you packed us out and everybody's like, oh, let's do this test. And we're going to get to go do this thing. And then you're, hanging off a burning cliff at 1 a.m. in the morning for 49 cents an hour. And I was like, I don't know why I fought to do this. Like, this seems like the worst idea ever. And so, but like, that was the system. And there wasn't there, even if you could have programmed, there really wasn't time for programming. And, it just didn't look like that the first time. And so, I had gotten, I got out, I lost my housing a couple weeks before I was supposed to release, and I had $40 gate money, and they were like, don't forget to report, good luck. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, no correspondence the entire time I was in prison. I didn't have a connection with anyone. And I called my kids' dad and asked him for help. And he was like the last person on the planet I wanted to call and ask for help. But it was like, if you're going to have a shot in hell at getting this together. And I made it a couple of months, and then it was over. I just pride and ego and these relationships that are not healed, trying to deal with the dynamics of that and the guilt and the shame of, sleeping on the floor of the baby's dad's house while the kids are running around, and like, who are you as a parent? Like, all of that stuff. And I beat myself to death with it. And then I ended up loaded. But the second time, the big prayer is getting there. And one of the things that is so beautiful and heartbreaking, but is that when you are in prison, you watch the funniest, most creative, enchanting, compassionate, driven individuals in the world, and you watch them rotate in and out the door, or they leave and they die. And it was like, what do you do? I just had this thought. I was like, what do you do? Like, I felt really fortunate is that I'd had some long-term sobriety and lived in the light of my life in a place. And I kind of had some places to go to try to get it together again. And, some ideas about that, but like manufacturing that from nothing and not being plugged into anything. I was like, and I didn't know, it was a quiet prayer in my heart at the time. It was like, there's got to be a way to stand in the gap between the mainstream community and this institution. Like, so that we're not funneling each other, you know, into the cemetery or back into trap houses or back here. Like, it's just this whole rotation. You get caught in the tumbler of that. And it's like, how do you get out of that? And I was really fortunate. I had some women that came and mentored me while I was in the institution. They can't show up every Saturday to come talk to me and a bunch of other girls. And I would walk out of the room and I go, I can't wait to see them next Saturday. You know, it was like on fire for life and some connection to outside and what it looked like to talk about like my power as a mother and my failings as a mother and the gifts that I had to give and the things that I needed to surrender. And it turned out that it wasn't that I was going to learn a bunch of new stuff. I was going to unlearn everything that I thought that was true and begin to like build. I was going to recreate my life. And it didn't mean that I was going to get any of my stuff back. Like I may have lost all of the things that were there, but like, was I enough to show up for? Like, was I enough? And there, to me, like hope is a beautiful thing. It's like, I don't know if the kids are going to forgive me, but I sure hope they do. And it's like, I don't know if I'm going to find a meaningful place to be employed, but I sure hope I do. And it was like, I'm going to remove the stuff that blocks me from being able to ask for help. Big one. You know, without feeling like I owe you something because you decided to, you know, come to my aid. So that I was going to stop assaulting myself about that stuff and just take the help. And I had some people that were real clear. You're not giving me shit, Carolyn, but an opportunity to be useful. And I need it because I'm selfish. And what you're going to get an opportunity to pay it forward. And your answer is going to be yes, when that time comes. And it was like, that was a bargain I could sign up for. And so like, I treated like my whole experience like that. And so I walked out of the institution and I got lucky enough to get a place to live. And the Department of Corrections said that they were going to pay for it for a couple of months, which was the best thing in the world because then I could breathe. Like I wasn't taking care or having to worry about taking care of my vitals. Is that like, I might be able to go look at like, maybe, what do you want? What do you want to do? And so I plugged in and like the very first thing I thought is like, go be useful to somebody other than yourself, like for whatever reason. And so I found a place to plug into some people and I was like, hey, I'd like to be useful here. Can you use the help? And they said, yes. And so I did.
Was that WELD Seattle?
It was WELD Seattle. Not when I first came out. For in the beginning, it was like I plugged into a 12-step community and I said, find something for me to do. And they said, oh, it pointed me in a corner. They're like, you can run this meeting. You can go help this new person who's just getting out of prison. She sounds like, her story sounds like yours. Go help her. And so like I started out in places like that. A guy gave me a job in a grocery store and I like have won everything on my record. And I thought no one's going to let me touch their cash register. Like that's never going to happen. And he was so sweet, Steve Mullen. And he said, hey, you ever been to prison? And I was like, oh God. And I was like, yes. And he was like, good. You're going to fit in great around here. And I was like, oh, like I just get to be myself. Like I just landed on these places where I could just be myself with the story that I had and it was enough. They're like, great. Like in that same way that Connie like just offered me trust. Like you get to have trust until you have shown that you deserve more or less.
That's a really good perspective to have.
Yeah.
For everything in life.
And I was just so damn grateful for it. I was like, I'm going to be the very best thing. I'm going to treat it as precious as it is to me. Like, you don't owe me nothing. I have a debt that's bigger than I'm ever going to be able to pay. The fact that I lived long enough to have a feeling again is no small miracle. And I treated my life like it was precious.
Carolyn, your life is precious and you're doing such incredible work. And I know you're empowering and helping so many other people. So how did you get connected to WELD Seattle?
Totally by fluke. One of this girl who was living in the same halfway house that I was living in, she's like, oh, I'm going to go move to this place. And I was like, cool, good luck. And she left. And then she had called me a couple months later and she's like, hey, they're looking for people to come and do house management for their women's program. They just started doing women for their program because they had done men in it for a couple of years. And they need somebody to come and run a women's house. And I was like, I'd love to do that. And so like, I went there and I talked to them and it wasn't long in the conversation of interviewing me to come be one of their house managers, like Jody Bardicky, he was He operates housing for WELD. He's the director. He was like, hey, I really like you. And we need somebody to, be a navigator for our women's housing program to kind of stand in the gap between the prison and the community. Would you be interested in that role? And I was like, I would be interested in that role. And so shortly after I came on as, in-house staff, they created a position for me at WELD, and I stood in the gap between the institution and the community, and did my best to share my story and a message of hope and create opportunity and make sure, it's like, instead of going, hey, here's a phone number, call me. I just was really, hey, it's me, Carolyn. I don't know if you remember me, but like, I just wanted to check on you and see how you're doing. Do you need to get plugged into anything? Do you need somebody to listen to like what you've got going on? Do you want to go have coffee or lunch? And so I just plugged into my community of women who were coming home that way. It was like, you don't need anybody to tell you how you're failing or how you're getting it right or any of that shit. You just need somebody to come to. Like, that's not everything else that It's like, and so that was the deal, is that I just stood in that place, and I did that for a few years. I got to be a part of that program. And then when our 1426 project launched for, collaborative reentry, a one-stop shop, I got invited by our founder. She's like, Carolyn, like, you really embody everything it is that we do around here. Do you want to come help run this thing? And I was like, well, yeah, I don't even really know what that means. But of course the answer is yes, because I say yes to my life. And so I find myself here. Yeah.
If you're enjoying this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast, you can see more about the lives, struggles, hopes, and dreams of incarcerated women in One Girl Revolution's The Girl Inside on YouTube. The Girl Inside is a short documentary. It's only 10 minutes, so not a huge commitment, that features the stories and voices of 5 incarcerated women at Cook County Jail and an academic storytelling class that changed their lives. The link is in the show notes. Please watch and share The Girl Inside today. And now back to the show.
Well, and your example too, to all of these women, I know that it inspires them that you have walked similar paths to them and that they can share anything with you and they're not going to be judged. You're just going to be like, hey, I know how that feels. Or maybe you didn't experience one of the things that they're struggling with, but you can be like, all right, we're going to get through this. What do you need? How do we get out of this? But I want to know, for people that are listening, can you share what is WELD Seattle? And there's also WELD Works. And then what's 1426? Tell me about the different platforms and programs you guys do.
It's my favorite. So WELD Seattle is the umbrella for all of our companies, and WELD Housing is a transitional clean and sober housing model. And it's really unique in that we utilize vacant developer properties. So they're houses that are completely habitable, but they're slated for demolition and remodel. They're going to repurpose them for the property for townhomes, multifamily units. And Seattle is notoriously slow in their permitting process. So for the period of time in which the developer waits for their permits, they allow us to house our population of people. And so we go into rotation. Our housing program is a soft year long, is that people can be with us for about a year unless they come on as house managers, in which they can stay indefinitely. They can be in that role for as long as they want to. But we operate from a recovery model. So, it's a skin in the game program. It's 100% abstinence and engagement in your own recovery program, what that looks like for you. People usually will fall into the existing culture of the house, which is dominantly 12-step based, but it's this engagement in community. And the 3 places is that we look at recovery, reentry, and restoration is like, what does that look like? It's like, what am I doing to nurture like my sobriety today and to maintain like some goals around like healthy living? And then do I have to clean up eviction histories or driver's license issues or open a bank account, really simple stuff. And then reunification stuff. It's like, do I have children that I'm trying to return to? And what does it look like to heal these damaged relationships with family and the places where like I feel like I owe some amends to the way that I showed up in my community or those kinds of things. So we talk about the process of healing all of the internal stuff so that like when these gifts arrive in our yard, it's that we can say yes to them. And so our housing program looks like that. And then WELD Works is a direct to work employment program. We work exclusively with second chance employers. So often there are so many guidelines and things that you have to navigate when you're coming out of an institution, is that maybe I do have family reunification stuff, so I'm dealing with family court, or these requirements that are in my judgment and sentence agreement that say that I have to go to treatment, or that I need to stop in the middle of my workday and go and take a UA with my probation officer, whatever other court obligations in multiple jurisdictions. It's really difficult to like go to this employer and go, I've got 19 things that I have to do this week, and they're all mandatory. And, but I really want this job. It's like, and we work with employers so that you can have the level of engagement that you want. If I can only work 4 hours this week, then I get to work 4 hours this week, and I get to show up and be with an employer. And if I want a full-time 40 or an hour a week job, then I can work a full 40 hours a week. And then WeldWorks provides wraparound services. So there's life skills and other things that people can engage in, transportation cost needs. If you're showing up to a job site, we provide, you know, in construction, work boots and all the tools that you need so that when you show up at the job, you look like you're supposed to be there. And so just navigating all of that stuff. We have peer mentors who work on staff so that when you are experiencing struggle, like what it feels like to be an employee or juggle multiple things like my recovery, my sobriety, and my family, all of these things that I've never done at one time, so that you can come in and talk to somebody that's on the team and go, hey, like I'm struggling with this stuff right now. Like, can I have some guidance or direction, or just maybe just an ear? I just need somebody to hear me and find out, am I crazy or is this normal? And so our peers do a dynamite job of just like connecting and going out to coffee and meeting with our folks and making sure that people are taking care of themselves. And if there's a problem, something's falling off, sobriety or any of those other things, it's like, hey, bro, like it looks like these things are falling apart. Do you want some help pulling that back together? And so you have somebody that is on the team for you for the whole ride, not just when you're getting it right, but to come and show you that you have worth and value when you're not doing yourself, you know, living in the story that you wanted to create for yourself. And so WeldWorks looks like that. And then we don't charge headhunter fees or any of that stuff. We actually act as a vetting process for our employers so they can see what it looks like to have you as an employee. And then if you want to pull them, then you go, there's a great employee, I'd like to have them full time. And we go, excellent, you should. We think you should. And so that's what our employment program looks like. And then 1426, that's our new baby is, you know, and that's, I feel like, you know, in the way that I kind of described it, like in no self-deprecating way, it's like, I find that I have landed in this position really divinely because of, you know, all of the work that we've done in the community, is like not only with individuals who are returning home from incarceration, but like meeting the families of and the community members that they're returning to, is that it's a healing that's happening for us all. And the systems in which we are incarcerated by is like cultivating relationships with the Department of Corrections and the county, and having these conversations about what it really looks like to meet people like in a place of healing, because it's like, are you interested in compliance or are you interested in transformation? Because those are really different things. You can get somebody who can show up and checks the box, but it doesn't change a thing in their heart. And so like, you know, changing the way that we relate to these systems, and because systems are individuals. They're individuals. And it's like, you know, it's that you change the heart and the mind, and the hands and feet are going to do the task, and the way in which the task is done matters. And so like that leads us to our 1426 project, is that there are people in the community that are doing dynamite work. And there are people in the Department of Corrections and in these other systems who are interested in change and transformation, is that we really want to stop like recidivism. And we know that recidivism isn't about recommitting a crime. Oftentimes it's a violation. It doesn't have anything to do with criminal behavior, and violations are symptomatic of trauma responses, the inability to show up and meet life on life's terms. And so we, you know, are designing this program so where people can come and get mental health care and get connected to SUD treatment assessment, like walkout adult education, housing and employment. One of the things that's not taken in consideration is leisure and recreation. It's like, yeah, I got to clean the life up, but how do I find peace or relief or relaxation? And so yoga, music, and art therapy, and there's going to be a recording studio in the building. And so like opportunities to plug into the work that's already being done in the community in one spot. So I'm not spreading myself all over the city trying to figure it out, is that I come in and I state what my need is, and that we have a dashboard that just really paints a picture of who you are and what is your need and what would you like to do and what's the big dream. And then you go, oh, you just go up to the second floor to get that. You can just go down the hall. And as a matter of fact, you're not going to leave until you talk to this person so that we can make a plan to how to implement that. And then you have somebody, it's like when you're dealing with the frustration of an auto dial system. So somebody who's just sitting in the chair next to you, helping you navigate the feeling. And so, yeah, 1426 is going to be this collaborative space where community, the private sector, nonprofits, and those who are returning home from incarceration can collaborate for our collective well-being.
I think that's so cool. And I'm so excited about 1426. I love everything that WELD is doing, but I just think that 1426 is so critical because even the power that music has, or the power that art has, or just, it's so therapeutic. And I think we all can relate to that. But just being this space where people can walk in and say, hey, I'm interested in recording, or they want to start a podcast or whatever, like that they would have the resources to even try that. Because I think we all can relate to how quickly we talked about like the trajectory of our lives and how sometimes it feels like you're on a conveyor belt. And sometimes you like fly through life, whether it's through incarceration or even just living your life. And then you get into your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s and you're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And so to even bring together like the arts and other creatives and creating this space where people can try different things and collaborate, and you just never, I can only imagine the power that that's going to have for the community. It's going to be amazing.
I know. I'm so excited about, this effort. So yeah, we break ground January of 2022, and we will, we're in a fundraising effort to, raise all the funds that we need, but we have our startup stuff to get started on the construction this next year. So that's, the big pitch is we'll be doing a bunch of our capital fundraising campaign and preparing for, the next stage of development for 1426. But yeah, we're in the money.
Well, I know that everybody who's listening is going to want to support everything that you're doing. So I will be sure to like promote that. And I can't wait to follow along and see it. And hopefully at some point I'll be able to come out to Seattle and see it in person when it's all put together. But Carolyn, I want to ask you about a couple of are there a couple of stories from WELD, like through your own experience, maybe people that you've worked with, just to kind of paint a picture? I think that stories are so important when we're talking about power of our lives, the power of these organizations to transform lives. And I know that you're working with individuals that you want to give them an opportunity to tell their own stories, but I also think you have a microphone right now, and I'd love for you to share a couple of stories of people that have come through the WELD community.
It's in the hundreds. There's so many stories. I think, and every single one of them is powerful. It's like if I'm going to talk about the one that's most recently impacted me, is that we do social media stuff. Mark Hoyen, he is our volunteer coordinator, and he manages all of our social media content. And so we had done something for WELD. I don't know. We're always goofing around doing something, but this guy comes in, and we have open door on Wednesdays where people can come in and they come get it connected to WELD Works, and they, ask questions around employment and that kind of thing. And so he had come in and he poked his head in the office. It was just the funniest thing. And he's like, oh my gosh, he goes, I just saw you guys on the internet. And we're like, really? And we were doing something for social media. And he's like, yeah, I thought you were paid actors. And we started laughing. And we're like, well, what can we help you with? Are you trying to get connected to housing or employment? And he's like, no, I just got out. I've been out for about 60 days. And I had a 196-year sentence, and his name is Bishop. And he said, I'm just like, I got housing, and I'm doing okay as far as like resources right now. I just really want to get connected to the work that you're doing. And so we took him around the building, and I introduced him to some other men, our director of our employment program, and his right-hand man, and, just other people in the building. And I was like, meet people. And he was like, this is fantastic. Can I just come here? And we're like, yeah, just come through. Like, we'd love to find some place for you to plug in. And so anyways, yeah, he had I hope I'm getting the numbers right, but I think he had a 196-year sentence, and he did 20 of those years, and 17 or 18 of them he used to study law, and he studied law, and he brought his case to clemency and fought his case, and he won. And so he won his freedom, and he came out, but he's been writing motions for other men who are in the institution who are not getting sentences that reflect the nature of the crime, is that these really harsh sentences, life without parole decisions. There were some guys that were connected to the Blake decision around felony convictions for drugs. And then, some of the crack laws that were handed down in the 80s and the 90s, where there were these harsh 3-strike sentences around drug convictions. And so he is somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or 30 in the time that he's been here, which has just been a few months, but helping guys to have write motions so that they have representation to fight their cases when they take them to clemency. And so he's been doing that work, but we brought him in just as a part-time employee for our WELD Works program, and have recently hired him on as full-time, and he is making a huge difference in the community. And it's that thing is that you show up and it's like, I'm 60 days out of the institution and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, but like, will you help me find a way to like make meaning out of like my life and my story? And it was just like, we love your life and your story. And yeah, we do want to help you. And of course, we don't ever know what it looks like on the front end. We just keep saying yes every day. And then, the universe has a way of helping you make meaning of your own life. And so, yeah, just saying yes to like who you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's important for everybody to be thinking about, that all of our lives do have meaning and purpose. And sometimes we go through things in order to help other people, or our story, no matter what we've been through, what we're going through, what we've done in our past. I had Sister Helen Prejean on the podcast the other week, and she's so amazing. And she shared this powerful line about how, none of us should be the sum of the worst thing that we've done. That doesn't. And so I think it's just important, and you guys are just all doing such incredible work, and your lives are such examples. And I can't wait to see where you go from here and to follow 1426. But Carolyn, I want to ask you, what do you hope that people can learn from your story, and what you've been through, what you've gone through, what you shared today? And then what do you hope that people can learn from your work?
Well, I think that really, learning from this is that that absolutely nothing in the known universe is wasted. Like it, absolutely every experience has value, and is that your story is somebody's medicine. And so, yeah, and I'd shared it before. It's that like, it isn't what you know, it's what you're willing to unknow. It's that all of this stuff is really fluid, and the things that I thought were my worst shames or my largest troubles have turned out to be the most valuable assets of my life. And yeah, say yes.
If you had to get to the root, like the very root, I'm always curious what the driving force is behind you every single day. What makes you wake up and want to do the work and get fired up what you're doing? If you could get to the very root of what drives you, what would that be, Carolyn?
Wow. That's a pretty intimate question. I have a deep belief system around the divine and intelligence of this whole thing. And the root is that I lived. I survived myself, and in spite of everything, and because that's true, it means that there's value. And so I seek to know what that is.
Well, every day is a journey and one step. And I think that women are so resilient. We hear these stories. I know you hear those stories every single day, and everybody is resilient. But I think that women have a particular gift to be resilient and show their strength and be an example to the rest of the world, but also impact their generations and generations to come, not only their children, but their children's children. And so that's really what this podcast is all about, is highlighting women and girls' stories, because we see the power that women embody. But Carolyn, I'm just so grateful for all the work that you're doing. How can people support WELD and 1426? Obviously, they can donate to your capital campaign. I will be sure to promote it through One Girl. They can follow you on social media. What are some ways that people can get involved in your work?
Of course, social media, please follow and like WELD Seattle on Instagram. Absolutely donate. When you follow us on social media. But if you are an employer and you are interested in making a contribution to the community in a way that's meaningful, is if you have the capacity to be a second chance employer, be a second chance employer. Some of the things that are really simple ways is that when you see someone that's in need, instead of questioning the way that they are going to use whatever resource you have available to you, is to be kind and make eye contact with people, because they are not forgotten people. They are future members of our community and can be returning mothers and daughters and sons, and to remind them of their own humanity so that they can remember to come home.
We don't know what other people are going through. And I think about that so often when you see somebody, they're a human being just like all of us. And we've all been through difficult journeys, or maybe we're going to go through something difficult in our life. And we all have different moments where we struggle. And so it's so important for us to look at the humanity of the other people. And you're doing that so much, Carolyn. And I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. But before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd love to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
And it's singular. I mean, there's just not enough language for it, but it's you're enough. You are enough. It's such a, we feel like that we have all of these things that we need to do, particularly, women in our country. It's like what it means to be feminine or uniquely, my own woman, and what gives me value, size, weight, shape, distribution, whatever those things are. And inherently, like this understanding of that you arrived on this planet with absolutely everything that you need, that you are enough. Yeah.
It's simple, but I think all of us need to be reminded of that every single day. I feel like I should write that down and put it on my wall, because we all need to be reminded that we're enough. But Carolyn, you are way more than enough. You are such a gift. And I'm so grateful to spend this time with you and share your story and share all about your great work. And we'll continue to follow everything that you're doing and promote it. But Carolyn, thank you so much for joining the One Girl Revolution podcast. And thank you for all the great work that you do.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.